The ship floated in the darkness like a dead whale in a black ocean. It had been drifting for centuries, maybe longer. Its hull was torn open in a dozen places, and frozen bodies still sat in their seats, their alien faces locked in expressions of terror. Jake Morris guided his small salvage vessel closer to the wreck. He had seen many dead ships in his years as a salvage operator, but this one felt different. Something about it made the hair on his arm stand up. "I don't like this, Emma," Cole said from the pilot seat behind him. She was studying the scanner readings on her screen. "This ship is old, Jake, really old. The metal composition doesn't match anything in our database." Jake smiled. "Old means valuable, you know that." Emma shook her head but said nothing more. She had been working with Jake for 3 years now. She knew that once he set his mind on something, there was no changing it. He was the most stubborn man she had ever met. Their ship, the Duster Runner, was small and ugly. It had been repaired so many times that barely any original parts remained, but it was fast and it was home. Jake and Emma had built a good life together, flying along the edges of known space, finding forgotten treasures, and selling them to collectors. Jake put on his space suit and checked his oxygen levels. "I'm going in. Keep the engines warm." "Always do," Emma replied. "And Jake, be careful. Something about this wreck feels wrong." He nodded and climbed into the airlock. A moment later, he was floating through the cold void toward the dead ship. The inside of the wreck was dark and silent. Jake turned on his helmet light and moved through the corridors. The walls were covered with strange writing that seemed to shift and move in the light. He passed more bodies. They were tall aliens with gray skin and forearms. Their eyes were still open, staring at nothing. Jake had seen death before. He had been a Marine before becoming a salvage operator. He had fought in 3 wars and watched friends die, but something about these bodies disturbed him deeply. They looked like they had died screaming. He moved deeper into the ship, checking rooms and storage areas. He found some valuable metals and a few pieces of technology that would sell well, but he kept going. Something was pulling him forward, like an invisible hand on his chest. Finally, he reached a large door at the end of a long hallway. It was sealed with heavy locks and covered with warning symbols. Jake didn't recognize the language, but the meaning was clear: "Stay out. Danger." "Found something interesting," he said into his radio. "What is it?" Emma asked. "A sealed room, heavy security. Whatever is inside, they really didn't want anyone to find it." "Then maybe you should leave it alone." Jake laughed. "Where's the fun in that?" He pulled out his cutting tool and began to work on the locks. It took him almost an hour to break through. When the door finally opened, cold air rushed out and frost formed on his visor. Inside the room was a single object, blade about 3 ft long, sitting in a glass case. It was the most beautiful weapon Jake had ever seen. The metal was pure black, darker than space itself. Crimson lines ran along the blade like veins of blood, and they seemed to glow with their own light. Jake stepped closer. His heart was beating fast now. He could hear something like whispers at the edge of his hearing. The blade seemed to be calling to him. "Jake, your heart rate just jumped." "What's happening?" Emma's voice seemed far away. He reached out and opened the glass case. The whispers grew louder. He could almost understand them now. They were speaking of power, of conquest, of Glory, his fingers touched the hilt. Universe exploded. Jake saw visions. Terrible visions. He saw planets burning. He saw armies marching across dead worlds. He saw a figure tall and terrible holding this very blade and laughing as civilizations fell before her. He saw her face beautiful and cruel, with eyes like burning amber, and he saw her weeping alone on a throne of bones. As the blade whispered poison into her mind, he pulled his hand away and fell backward. His breathing was heavy and his whole body was shaking. Jake, Jake, answer me, Emma was shouting now. I'm okay, he said, though he wasn't sure if that was true. I found something, a weapon, some kind of sword. Leave it, whatever it is, leave it and come back. Jake looked at the blade. Every instinct told him to run, to seal this room and never come back, but he couldn't. He had seen the face of the woman in his visions. He had felt her pain, her madness, her regret. This blade belonged to someone who had hidden it away for a reason. He picked up the blade carefully, wrapping it in cloth from his pack. The whispers continued, but they were quieter now. He could ignore them if he tried hard enough. When he returned to the Dustrunner, Emma was waiting at the airlock. Her face went pale when she saw the wrapped object in his hands. What did you do? She asked. I found something that doesn't belong to me, Jake said. He unwrapped the blade just enough for her to see the crimson lines pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. Emma took a step back. Get that thing off my ship. I can't, Jake. I'm serious. I can feel it. That thing is evil. He looked at her with tired eyes. I know that's why I can't just leave it floating in space. Someone hid this weapon because it was too dangerous to keep. If I leave it here, someone else will find it. Someone who might use it. So what are you going to do? Jake wrapped the blade again and held it close. I'm going to return it to whoever it belongs to. Emma stared at him for a long moment. Then she sighed and walked back to the pilot seat. You're insane, you know that, right? Maybe, Jake admitted, but I'm also right. We need to find out who made this thing, and we need to give it back. Dustrunner's engines roared to life, and they left the dead ship behind. As they flew into the darkness, neither of them noticed the shadows in the corners of the ship growing just a little bit darker. The blade had found a new carrier, and it was patient. It could wait. 3 days passed, and the Dustrunner was not the same ship anymore. It started small. Emma noticed shadows moving in places where there should be no shadows. She heard sounds at night when she was trying to sleep, footsteps in empty hallways, whispers in languages she had never heard before. She told herself it was just her imagination, but deep down she knew the truth. The blade was doing something to their ship. Jake was changing too. He barely slept now when Emma found him in the cargo hold at 3:00 in the morning, just staring at the wrapped blade. She knew things had gotten bad. You need to rest, she said softly. Jake turned to look at her. His eyes were red and tired, with dark circles underneath. I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see things, terrible things. The visions, he nodded slowly. I see her. The woman who owned this blade. I see what she did with it. Emma, she destroyed entire worlds, billions of people, and she enjoyed it. Emma sat down beside him. Then why are you protecting it? Why don't we just throw it into a star? Because that's not how it works. Jake's voice was heavy with exhaustion. I can feel the blade now. It's connected to me somehow. If we destroy it without knowing how, something bad will happen. I don't know what, but I can feel it. Emma wanted to argue, but she could see the truth in his eyes. Whatever this weapon was, it had its hooks in him now. The only way forward was to find answers. There's a trading station about 2 days from here, she said. Way station. Omega, it's a neutral zone where all species do business. If anyone knows about this blade, we might find them there. Jake managed a small smile. Thank you for not giving up on me. Don't thank me yet. If this thing tries to possess you or something, I'm throwing both of you out the airlock. They changed course for Way Station Omega. The station was a massive structure built into an asteroid. Ships from 100 different species came and went constantly. It was a place of trade, secrets, and danger. The perfect place to find information about mysterious alien weapons. Jake and Emma walked through the crowded markets, keeping the blade hidden in a long bag. Over Jake's shoulder, they asked questions carefully, not wanting to attract too much attention. Most people knew nothing. Some refused to talk. But finally, they found someone who could help. He was an old alien sitting alone in a dark corner of a drinking establishment. His species was Kathrani, tall and thin, with gray skin and 4 arms. His face was covered with wrinkles and his eyes had the look of someone who had seen too much. Emma approached him carefully. Excuse me, we're looking for information about an old weapon. We were told you might know something. The old alien looked up at them with tired eyes. I know many things, but knowledge has a price. Jake placed a small bag of credits on the table. Will this cover it? The alien counted the money and nodded. What do you want to know? Jake sat down across from him and lowered his voice. I found a blade, black metal with red lines that glow. It's old, very old, and it does something to your mind. The old alien's face changed immediately. The color drained from his gray skin, and his 4 hands began to shake. He looked around quickly, as if expecting enemies to appear from the shadows. Where did you find this blade? He whispered. A dead ship. Everyone on board was killed. The alien closed his eyes and made a sign with his hands, some kind of prayer. Emma guessed when he spoke again. His voice was barely audible. You have found the Fang of Vela, the cursed blade of our queen. Jake leaned closer. Tell me everything. The old alien story took over an hour. He spoke of ancient times when the Kathrani Empire was young and hungry for power. Queen Vela had ruled for 300 years, longer than any ruler before her. She was brilliant and ruthless, but it was not enough for her. She wanted more. The blade was created by her greatest scientists and darkest priests. They poured forbidden knowledge into its making. They used blood, sacrifices, and terrible rituals. When it was finished, the Fang of Vela was the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. It could cut through any material. It could destroy shields and break walls, but that was not its true power. The blade fed on hatred and ambition. It took these feelings from its wielder and made them stronger. It whispered to Vela, filling her mind with dreams of conquest. Under its influence, she led her armies across the stars. 12 civilizations fell before her. Billions died. The Kathrani Empire grew until it covered half the galaxy, but power has a cost. The blade was never satisfied. It demanded more hatred, more conquest. More blood, Vela became a monster, killing her own people for small offenses. She trusted no one she saw. Enemies everywhere. The blade had driven her mad, finally after 1,000 years of bloodshed. Something inside Vela broke. She looked at what she had become and felt horror. In a moment of clarity, she sealed the blade away and banished it to the farthest corner of space. Without the weapon's influence, she slowly regained her sanity. She stopped the conquests. She tried to rebuild, but the damage was done. Her empire was built on bones and suffering, and the blade was still out there, waiting. Whoever returns the blade to the queen will face her wrath. The old alien finished, for its return means her curse will awaken once more. She will kill you rather than touch it again. Jake was quiet for a long moment, then he stood up. Where is she? Where is Queen Vela? Where is Queen Vela? The alien stared at him in disbelief. Did you not hear what I said? She will kill you, maybe, but this blade is too dangerous to leave alone. Someone worse than me might find it. She made it. She needs to deal with it. Emma grabbed his arm. Jake, this is crazy. We should just seal it away somewhere. Hide it again. Jake looked at her with calm, steady eyes. And then what? Wait for someone else to find it. Let the cycle continue. He shook his head. No, this ends now. We take it to the queen. Old alien wrote down coordinates with a trembling hand. The Kathrani home world. May whatever gods you believe in protect you, because nothing else will. Jake took the coordinates and walked toward the exit. Emma followed, her heart heavy with fear. They were flying straight into the heart of an empire built on conquest to return a cursed weapon to a queen who might kill them on sight. But that was Jake Morris. He always did the right thing, even when the right thing was insane. The Dustrunner left Way Station Omega and set course for Cathani space. The blade seemed to pulse faster now, as if it knew it was going home. The Kathrani home world appeared on their screens like a dark jewel floating in space. It was a massive planet, larger than Earth, covered in thick clouds that blocked most sunlight. What little land they could see was filled with black towers and sprawling cities. Everything looked sharp and cruel, like the planet itself was a weapon. Jake stared at the screen in silence. Beside him, Emma was checking their shields and weapons, even though they both knew it would make no difference. If the Kathrani wanted them dead, they would be dead. We should probably come up with a plan, Emma said. I have a plan. Does your plan involve anything other than walking up to an alien queen and handing her a cursed sword? Jake thought about it for a moment. Not really. No, Emma sighed. I hate you sometimes. Before Jake could respond, alarms started screaming throughout the ship. 6 Cathani warships had appeared around them, surrounding the Dustrunner completely. Each ship was 10 times their size, covered with weapons that glowed with deadly energy. A voice came through their communication system. It was cold and commanding. Unknown vessel, you have entered Cathani space without permission. Identify yourself immediately or be destroyed. Jake pressed the communication button. My name is Jake Morris. I'm a human from Earth. I'm here to return something that belongs to your queen. There was a long pause, then the voice returned, sounding confused. You are here to return something. Explain. I found an artifact, a weapon. I believe it belongs to Queen Vela. I want to give it back to her. Another pause, even longer this time. Jake could imagine the Kathrani officers trying to figure out if this human was serious or insane. Finally, a different voice came through. This one was deeper and more authoritative human. I am Commander Talos, leader of the Queen's personal guard. You will allow my soldiers to board your vessel. Any resistance will result in your immediate death. Jake looked at Emma. She shrugged helplessly. Understood, Commander. Jake said, we won't resist. Minutes later, a small shuttle connected to the Dustrunner. The airlock opened and 12 Kathrani soldiers marched in. They were enormous, standing nearly 8 feet tall with gray skin and 4 muscular arms, each one carried a weapon that hummed with energy. Behind them came Commander Talos. He was even larger than the others, with scars covering his face and arms. His eyes were sharp and intelligent, studying Jake and Emma like a predator studying prey. Where is this artifact? Talos demanded. Jake pointed to the cargo hold. In there, wrapped in cloth. Talos gestured, and 2 soldiers went to retrieve it. When they returned with the long bundle, Talos unwrapped it carefully. The moment he saw the blade, his entire body went stiff. The black metal gleamed in the ship's lights, and the crimson lines pulsed slowly like a heartbeat. For several seconds, Talos said nothing. Then he looked at Jake with an expression that mixed fear, anger, and something like respect. How did you get this? Found it on a dead ship. Everyone on board was killed. I don't know by what. The blade killed them, Talos said quietly. It does that when it has no master. It feeds on life. He wrapped the blade again, his movements careful and afraid. You touched it. The blade has marked you. Jake nodded. I know. I've been having visions, and yet you brought it here. Why? Because it doesn't belong to me. Because it's too dangerous to leave floating in space. Because your queen needs to deal with it. Taylor studied Jake for a long moment. Something changed in his eyes. Not trust exactly, but recognition. He had met many beings in his long life. Criminals, cowards, conquerors, but this human was different. There was no greed in his eyes, no hidden plan, just simple, stubborn honor. You are either very brave or very stupid, Talos said. Finally, I've been told it's both, Jake replied. Talos almost smiled. Almost. Come with me. The Queen will decide what to do with you. They were taken to a smaller Kathrani ship and transported down to the planet's surface. The city they landed in was enormous, filled with buildings that reached toward the dark sky like grasping fingers. Everything was black and gray, with harsh red lights providing the only color. Jake noticed something strange as they walked toward the palace. Many statues and monuments were covered with cloth, as if the Kathrani were trying to hide them. Murals on walls had been painted over, covering images that Jake could barely make out underneath. Your people seem ashamed of something, Jake said to Talos. The commander's jaw tightened. We are ashamed of many things. The Queen's conquests brought us great power, but they also brought great suffering. Many of us remember the cost. And yet you still serve her. I serve because I believe she can change. Because I have seen glimpses of who she was before the blade. Talos looked at Jake with serious eyes. If you truly want to help her, human, you must be prepared for what you will face. The Queen is ancient and powerful. She has killed beings far greater than you. Without hesitation, I'm not trying to fight her. I'm trying to give her back her sword. That may be worse. They entered the palace through massive doors, carved with scenes of battle and conquest. The hallways were wide enough for giants lined with trophies from conquered worlds, weapons, flags, and artifacts from 100 different civilizations decorated the walls. At the end of the longest hallway, they reached the throne room. The doors opened slowly, revealing a chamber so vast that clouds gathered near the ceiling. At the far end on a throne, carved from pure black stone, sat Queen Vela. Jake had seen her in his visions, but nothing had prepared him for the real thing. She was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Her skin was pale gray, almost white, and her eyes burned like amber fire. She wore armor made of the same black metal as the blade, and her presence filled the room like a physical weight. When her eyes found the wrapped blade in Talos's hand, something changed in the air. The temperature dropped, the lights flickered. Every guard in the room took a step backward. Who brought this here? Her voice was soft, but it carried through the entire chamber. It was the voice of someone who had ordered the deaths of billions. Jake stepped forward. He could feel the fear trying to take hold of him, but he pushed it down. He had faced death before. He would face it again. Now I did, he said. My name is Jake Morris. I found this blade on a dead ship, and I brought it back to you. Queen Vela rose from her throne. She was taller than Talos, towering over everyone in the room, her eyes fixed on Jake, studying him with ancient intelligence. You dare, she whispered, and her voice echoed with terrible power. Bring that abomination before me. Jake reached over, took the blade from Talos, and walked forward. Every soldier raised their weapon. Every instinct screamed at him to stop, but he kept walking until he stood at the base of the throne. Then he placed the blade at her feet and stepped back. It belongs to you, he said simply. I thought you'd want it back. For a moment, the universe held its breath. Then Queen Vela's rage exploded like a dying star. The throne room became a storm of chaos and terror. Queen Vela's body expanded with dark energy. Shadows poured from her like smoke from a fire. Her eyes blazed with crimson light, and her voice became a thunderous roar that shook the walls. You dare bring this curse back to me, she screamed. You dare remind me of what I was. Jake stood his ground even as the force of her power pushed against him like a hurricane wind. His feet slid backward on the smooth floor, but he did not fall. Behind him, Emma had been pushed against a pillar, her face white with terror. Seize them, Vela commanded. Kill the human, kill them both. Guards rushed forward, their weapons raised. Jake closed his eyes, ready for the end. He had known this might happen. He had accepted it. At the moment he decided to come here, but the killing blow never came. Wait, a voice cut through the chaos like a knife. It was female, old but strong. The guard stopped. Queen Vela turned her burning gaze toward the speaker, an elderly Cathani woman stepped forward from the shadows. She wore robes of deep purple, and her head was crowned with a circle of silver. Her 4 hands were raised in a gesture of peace. High Priestess Nora. Vela hissed, you dare interrupt me? I dare because I must. Nora walked forward without fear, her eyes fixed on the queen. Look at what you are doing. Look at yourself. Vela and LT Unk and GT's form flickered. For just a moment her rage wavered. This human has brought my curse back. He has doomed me, has he? Nora stopped beside Jake and looked down at the blade lying at Vela's feet. Or has he given you a chance? A chance? For what? To become the monster again. To feel the blade's whispers driving me mad, a chance to end it forever. The throne room fell silent, even the shadows seemed to pause their dancing. Vela stared at her high priestess with confusion and suspicion. Explain yourself, old woman. Nara took a deep breath. There is a prophecy, my queen. One that has been kept hidden for 1,000 years. The priests of old saw it in their visions and were too afraid to speak of it, but I am old now and I have nothing left to fear. She closed her eyes and spoke in a voice that seemed to come from somewhere far away. When the blade returns by innocent hands, the queen must face her shadow. Only then can the chain be broken. Only then can the curse be ended. The weapon will return when the wielder is ready. The form or not. Vela's eyes widened. You knew this prophecy and never told me. I was afraid. We were all afraid. We thought that if the blade never returned, you would be safe, but we were wrong. Nora pointed at Jake. This human found the blade by chance. He could have sold it for wealth. He could have used its power for himself. Instead, he traveled across the galaxy, risking his life to return it to its rightful owner. She turned to face Jake. Tell me, human, why did you do this? What did you hope to gain? Jake's voice was steady when he answered, nothing. I hope to gain nothing. Then why? Because it was the right thing to do. Jake looked at Queen Vela, meeting her burning eyes without flinching. I found your sword in a dead ship. I felt what it could do. I saw what it made you become. That thing is poison, and I couldn't just leave it floating in space for someone worse to find. You risked your life for nothing. Vela asked. Her voice was quieter now, confused. Not for nothing, for doing what's right. Where I come from, that matters. It might not make sense to you. It might seem stupid, but some things are worth dying for, even if no one ever knows you did them. The shadows around Vela began to fade. Her form slowly returned to normal, though her eyes still glowed with inner fire. She descended from her throne, step by step, until she stood directly in front of Jake. She was so tall that he had to crane his neck to look at her face. Up close, he could see the weight of centuries in her eyes. Pain, regret, loneliness. She had lived for over 1,000 years, ruled an empire, conquered worlds, and in all that time, she had never met anyone like this. Small, fragile human, your species, she said slowly. You are weak, your lives are short, your bodies are soft, and yet you stand before me, a being who has destroyed civilizations. And you do not beg for mercy. Would begging help? No, then I won't waste my time. Jake's voice remained calm. Look, I'm not trying to be a hero. I'm just a guy who found something that didn't belong to him. I could have kept it. I could have thrown it away. Instead, I brought it back. If you want to kill me for that, go ahead, but it says more about you than it does about me. Vela stared at him for a long moment. Then something extraordinary happened. She laughed. It was not a cruel laugh or a mocking laugh. It was the laugh of someone who had just heard something so absurd, so unexpected that laughter was the only response. It filled the throne room, bouncing off the walls and high ceiling. You are either the bravest creature I have ever met, she said when her laughter faded, or the most foolish. Probably both, Jake admitted. Vale turned to look at the blade lying on the ground. The crimson lines were pulsing faster now, as if the weapon could sense her nearby. She could feel its call even from this distance. Power, strength, conquest. All of it could be hers again. I sealed that blade away because it was destroying me, she said quietly. Every day I held it, I became less myself. By the end, I didn't recognize the creature I had become, then destroy it. Jake said, it cannot be destroyed. We tried everything, fire, acid, the hearts of stars, nothing works. There has to be a way. Nora stepped forward. Again, there is one way, the prophecy speaks of it. The blade was forged with hatred and bound with blood. Only the one who wielded it can unmake it. Only you, my queen. Vela closed her eyes. The ritual of unbinding, the ancient rites that were forbidden 1,000 years ago. Yes, if I fail, the blade will consume me completely. I will become the monster. Again, worse than before. Yes, the queen was silent for a long time. Everyone in the throne room held their breath. Finally, she opened her eyes and looked at Jake once more. You came here expecting to die. You were willing to sacrifice yourself for a principle, for honor. She shook her head slowly. In all my years of conquest, I never met anyone like you. My own generals would have kept the blade for themselves. My own advisors would have sold it for power. She reached down and picked up the blade. The moment her fingers touched the hilt, the crimson lines blazed with light. The whispers that Jake had heard for days became screams. The blade knew it was home. If a human can carry such integrity, Vela said, her voice filled with new determination, then perhaps I can carry the weight of my sins. She looked at Nora. Prepare the ritual. Tonight we end this. Ritual chamber was located deep beneath the palace, carved from ancient stone that had existed before the Cathani built their first cities. Strain symbols covered every surface, glowing with a faint blue light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Jake and Emma stood at the edge of the chamber, watching as Kathrani priests prepared for what was about to happen. Hundreds of candles were lit around a central platform where Queen Vela would perform the ritual. The air was thick with incense and something else, something that felt like electricity before a storm. Emma leaned close to Jake. I still can't believe we're alive. Me neither, Jake admitted, but we're not done yet. Commander Talos approached them. His scarred face was serious, but there was something new in his eyes. Respect perhaps, or understanding. The Queen has ordered me to tell you something, Talos said. Whatever happens tonight, you are to be given safe passage out of Cathani space. You will also receive payment for returning the blade. Jake shook his head. I don't want payment. Talos tilted his head, confused. You risked your life. You deserve reward. I didn't do this for money. I did it because it was right. If I take payment now, it changes everything. For a long moment, Talos simply stared at him. Then he placed his hand over his chest in what appeared to be a gesture of deep respect. You are a strange creature, Jake Morris. Your species is young and small, but you carry something that many older races have lost. Perhaps the galaxy needs more humans in it. Before Jake could respond, the ritual began. Queen Vela entered the chamber, wearing robes of pure white instead of her usual black armor. Her feet were bare, and her silver hair flowed freely down her back. She looked different now, vulnerable, almost mortal. In her 4 hands she carried the cursed blade. The weapon seemed to fight against her grip, twisting and pulling as if it were alive. The crimson lines along its surface burned bright red, and the whispers that had haunted Jake for days now filled the entire chamber like screaming voices. High Priestess Nora stepped forward and began to speak in an ancient language. The symbols on the walls glowed brighter in response. The temperature dropped until Jake could see his own breath. Vela walked to the center of the platform and knelt down. She placed the blade across her knees and closed her eyes. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the blade fought back. Dark energy exploded from the weapon, wrapping around Vela like chains of shadow. The queen gasped in pain as the blade tried to reconnect with her mind. Jake could see the struggle on her face. The blade was offering her everything it had offered before: power, conquest, the ability to crush her enemies and rule without challenge. All she had to do was accept. Remember who you were, Nora called out. Remember who you can be. Vela's face twisted with effort. The shadows tightened around her, trying to crush her will. The blade's screams grew louder, filling Jake's mind with images of destruction and glory. He fell to his knees, hands pressed against his ears. Emma rushed to help him, but she too was affected by the blade's power. All around the chamber, priests collapsed, and guards struggled to stay standing. The blade was fighting with everything it had. Then Vela opened her eyes, and they were not filled with madness or hunger for power. They were filled with tears. I remember, she whispered. I remember who I killed. I remember who I was before you poisoned me. She grabbed the blade with all four hands and began to speak the words of unbinding. Each word seemed to cost her tremendous effort. Each syllable tore at the fabric of reality itself. The chamber shook. Stones fell from the ceiling. The blue symbols on the walls turned blinding white. The blade screamed one final time. It was a sound of pure hatred, of denied hunger, of 1,000 years of patience destroyed. Then it began to crack. Light poured from the fractures in the black metal. The crimson lines flickered and died. The shadows retreated from Vela's body like frightened animals. With one final word, Vela completed the ritual. The blade shattered. Pieces of black metal flew in all directions. The screaming stopped. The shadows vanished, and silence, true silence, fell over the chamber for the first time in 1,000 years. Jake slowly got to his feet. His head ached and his ears rang, but he was alive. Emma stood beside him, her face pale but relieved. All around them, priests and guards were picking themselves up from the floor. On the platform, Queen Vela remained kneeling. She was smaller now, Jake realized, not physically but somehow less. The terrible weight of power that had surrounded her was gone. She looked almost ordinary. Slowly she rose to her feet. She looked at the broken pieces of the blades scattered around her, and a smile crossed her face. It was not the smile of a conqueror or a queen. It was the smile of someone who had just been freed from a very long prison. It is done, she said. Her voice was different too, softer, more human, if that word could apply to an alien. The curse is broken. Nora rushed forward and embraced her queen. Soldiers and priests cheered. The tension that had filled the chamber dissolved into relief and joy. Jake watched it all with a quiet sense of satisfaction. He hadn't come here for thanks or praise. He had come because it was the right thing to do, and somehow, against all odds, it had worked. Vela approached him without the blades influence. She seemed less terrifying. She was still tall and powerful, but there was warmth in her eyes now. You have done what no Cathani could, she said, "You reminded me that power without honor is poison, that's strength. Without mercy is weakness. I just returned your sword," Jake said. "You did the hard part." Vela shook her head. "Without your example, I would not have had the courage. I would have killed you and hidden the blade again, repeating the same mistake. But you showed me something I had forgotten, that even small creatures can carry great honor." She reached into her robe and pulled out a small metal badge. It was carved with symbols that Jake didn't recognize. "This is the mark of the Queen's friend," Vela explained. "Anyone who carries it will be welcomed in Kathrani's space as an honored guest. My empire will protect you." Jake Morris clears throat. "And your species?" Jake looked at the badge, then back at Vela. "What will you do now? Your empire is built on conquest. Then I will rebuild it on something else. Peace, perhaps. Trade, understanding." She smiled sadly. "It will take centuries to undo the damage I caused, but I have centuries, and now I have hope." As Jake and Emma left the palace, the sky outside was changing. For the first time in 1,000 years, the clouds over the Kathrani home world were breaking apart. Sunlight streamed through, bathing the dark city in golden light. Emma looked up at the sky, then at Jake. "You know, when I agreed to be your partner, I thought we would just find old junk and sell it." Jake grinned, disappointed. "Ask me again afterward." Safely in hyperspace, they boarded the Duster Runner and left the planet behind. As they jumped to faster than light speed, Jake took one last look at the Kathrani home world on his screen. The light was spreading now, pushing back the eternal twilight. He had come to return a sword. He had ended a curse. And maybe, just maybe, he had helped save an empire from itself. Not bad for a simple salvage operator from Earth. Emma set course for home, and the stars blurred around them. Behind them, the Kathrani began a new chapter in their history, a chapter written not with blood and conquest, but with the memory of a small, stubborn human who did the right thing simply because it was right. And somewhere in the void, the shattered pieces of the Fang of Vela drifted among the stars, finally at peace.